Hi folks, welcome to my channel, and happy December. Is it over yet? You know, this time of year, I tend to get weird thoughts, and I tend to become a bit of an introvert. Now I want to be clear, I'm not just talking about seasonal depression or how capitalism is repeatedly smacking me in the face and kicking my disabled ass in plain sight. Nope, not this time. I'm talking about thoughts that I get because this time of year, Christianity goes hardcore on the propaganda, and it's everywhere. And that, of course, only makes me think of the multiple crusades / murderous rampages that they conducted, and how many cultures, traditions, and languages we lost. But also, what about all of the truth? All the truth that we lost? How many people suffered and died so that they could rule? So today, I'm going to tell you the Christian story that plays over in my head the most this time of year. Also known as probably the reason you shouldn't invite me to your religious grandmother's Christmas dinner. Because today, I want to tell you the story about a scared little girl and, I don't know, the possible defense mechanism that she used that changed the world, or at least had an effect on the whole world. Because I was fascinated, enamored with her even since I was a child. Today, I want to talk about Mary. Because it's December, and that's where the lie begins. Because, you know, according to the Bible's own description of the stars, any astronomer will tell you there's no chance that Jesus was born in December. And I find it fascinating that if you look into history in many other cultures throughout history, there have been many similar stories. From the tale of a virgin birth to the importance of a particular season. But for the sake of my video today, let's take the Christians on their own words. Let's humor them. Because honestly, this story always fascinated me as a child. And as a child, I was always attracted to pretty pictures. I always loved art, and she was always depicted so beautifully. Such a, porcelain perfect face, flawless, draped in these beautiful white and blue clothes. And they told me she was chosen by God to perform a miracle. She brought forth a miracle. You know, my very Catholic Polish grandmother was Pope John Paul II's biggest fan. I was Mary's. But you know, as I got older and got access to the internet, reality ruined everything for me. I researched too much. I went too far. Because anybody that knows me will tell you that when I'm interested in something, I go hardcore on it. Except relationships. Those scare the bejesus out of me. I digress. And the more and more research I did on my girl Mary, the sadder I got. And people are celebrating this trash. So long story short, according to apocryphal accounts, my girl Mary would have been maximum between the ages of 12 and 14 when some so-called holy men handed her off to a much older male. And the long story short on that is they hide it all in plain sight, and history repeats itself. Sadly, it seems pretty clear to me that Mary was a victim in plain sight and was either forced to make up a crazy story, or I don't know, maybe she was a genius and a good talker who came up with a plan that saved her life. And if I'm really going to continue being brutally honest with you all, I think it's kind of sick that the church still speaks of her so openly, without an apology for, human trafficking, forced marriages. Nope, instead it's celebrated. So it is believed that this Mary that the church so fondly speaks of was entrusted to the temple at an early age. Historically speaking, data shows us it would have been around when she hit puberty. And unfortunately for Mary, puberty coming along for this little girl meant that soon after, some so-called holy men were going to marry her off. Forced marriage. And poor Mary, she got handed to an old man. So just to be clear what we're talking about here, what we know about that system is Mary could have been anywhere between 9 and 14 when she was handed to this temple. And if we go on the church's own words, she was merely a child when some old man named Zachariah claimed that an angel of the Lord spoke directly to him. Yeah, because that happens. And then basically there's this like ridiculous mansplaining, church embellished story involving a dove landing on this old man Josef's head, which of course is clearly a sign that the Lord wants Joseph to have this child. You heard me. The claim would be made that the Lord told this Zachariah guy to hand this child to that old man. Okay, Zach. And sticking to the Christian's own words, according to church documents, this old man Joseph, he was already a widower at this point. And when I say widower, the church will openly tell you that at the point that that temple handed this little girl, this child, to this old widower named Joseph, he already had like 6 adult children, I believe 4 boys, 2 girls, from a previous marriage, a deceased wife. I have no data on how young his previous wife was, unfortunately. But just let that sink in. This young girl Mary just got her first period. Like, that's not bad enough. She's then handed off like an object to some old man with adult children. Ugh. You know, when I was 14, I was actively trying to hide from friends that I still played with Barbies, that I still played with dolls, because I was scared they would make fun of me. Later in my teen years, I came up pregnant, and I hid it for some time because I was scared. I was scared of a lot of things, mostly society's judgment. Like, I want to say I can relate with my girl Mary, but man, I cannot imagine the pain that that child was forced to feel, what she went through. The whole godchild story surely saved her life. Seeing as our girl Mary was growing up at a time where, let's call it an adult act, any adult act that she would have been involved in, even if it was forced upon her. In this day and age, it would have been viewed as her sin, her shame. And possibly she could have been stoned to death for this. Because let's be clear, according to church documents, old man Joseph loudly and clearly proclaimed he didn't touch that child. Interesting how that question even came up. I'm just saying, I know if I lived back then, I would have brought it up. But then I probably would have been promptly stoned to death. Men were really running shit back in that day, and women were being traded and treated like objects. So sadly, I'm left to believe that poor little Mary had no say in any of this stuff. She had no say in anything being done to her. And I just feel like that's not something to celebrate. You know, the problem with lies is you have to be really on your game to keep that story straight. You end up making more lies to cover up those lies. Maybe even ultimately creating an entire false reality. But that false reality will get questioned from time to time. And people will find holes in your story. So like eventually you're forced to admit your wrongdoings. Or you could go next level crazy pants, like the church. Meaning you put yourself high up on a pedestal. And should people question your lies, you threaten them with things like eternal damnation. To protect the lies, you use threats to make yourself untouchable. All the while repeating the same deviant behavior in plain view of the society that you actively rob and commit crimes against humanity, especially against children, over and over and over and over again. History, Christianity, lies, kids. Poor Mary. Yeah, poor Mary. Am I right? But before I get out of here, I need to talk to those of you that are getting ready to type that comment about how things were different back then in those days. May I also remind you, things were different back in the days when the Europeans decided to colonize an entire country and commit a genocide against multiple tribes, many tribes. And it was a different time back in those days when those same European colonizers / genocide committers decided to enslave actual human beings and treat them like animals. And may I just remind you for funsies that genocide committed by those people had full and active participation of the church and many native children suffered. And what I'm saying is, sure, times were different back then, but I don't think we should be celebrating any of these things. So sure, I can hear you tippity-tap typing, times were different back then. But you know what? There's no reason we should be celebrating any of that shit now. If you don't learn from your past, you are doomed to repeat it. So yeah, folks, as I film this video, it's December. And even though thoughts of Mary make me sad, I do wish to say to you, this winter season, that I do hope you enjoy your pagan midwinter festival activities with people that you love. Drink much and toast to the pagan gods for a prosperous new year. As usual, I do thank you for being here. Don't forget to leave me a like, maybe consider subscribing if you haven't already. I really do hope to be coming at you soon with another video, but until that happens, I hope that you're over there taking care of yourself. And leave the kids alone.